Well, recently I've been a little busy with the Cherokee and doing some work on it. I've added some K suspension shackles in the rear, which I got the weld together kits. And then I swapped the rear axle out with an Isuzu rodeo D44 that came out of a 2000. I re-geared it to 488 with some motive gears and put an aux locker in there. I used the Barnes 4-wheel drive swap kit for 8/8 since I use the same size axle tube. And then you can see here I relocated the bump stop pad that is factory on an Isuzu 44. And then I used some box tube up top to extend the bump stops up there. So with that, I switched over to 6-lug, and it's a 63-inch wide axle. So I had to get some wheels with less back spacing to end up at the same width that I wanted to be at. And they discontinued the 35, 12.5, 15 MTRs, so I ended up getting Wild Peak MTs. So hopefully they'll work out well, and I'll let you guys know how they do as I wheel some more with them. For the rear, the drive shaft worked out fine because the Dana 44 and the 8 1/4 have the same length snout. But if you had a Dana 35, you'd have to get a little bit shorter of a drive shaft, which also the Isuzu 44 uses the larger ring and pinion of the next generation JK44 style. And then also the brakes are massive on this thing. It's got some vented rotors in the rear, which is new to me because with the 8 1/4 Liberty swap, it just had solid rotors. And then in the front, as you can see, it's 6-lug with locking hubs now and massive brakes. So for the front, it is a Ford high pinion Dana 44. This has been narrowed down to wagoneer axle shaft width so that I could use a more common width axle shaft, easier to find and such. And then I had to use Chevy outers to get the 6-lug pattern that I was looking for. And then I ended up going with Toyota wheel studs from a solid axle truck so that I could match the same thread pitch as the rear studs. So this has an aux locker as well. As you can see, it has 488 motive gears, stock wagoneer shafts with 5 760 XU joints right now. The brakes are so much bigger than what a Dana 30 has to offer. And then I went with the Chevy 1-ton tie rod ends with the Johnny joints on the track bar for this setup. And I just used that's a Barnes 4-wheel drive track bar bracket and Rubicon Express brackets for the rest. It has a reed knuckle over here for crossover steering and a factory knuckle over there. I used 1.5-inch spacers so that the front and the rear would have the same track width or wheel mounting surface, so that I could keep a stock width Cherokee with stronger axles. For this one, I ended up having to use a shorter drive shaft because the Dana 30 has a shorter snout than the Dana 44. And then as you can see, I repainted my cab fab 3-link. So some of the issues that I ran into with this swap is the track bar bracket. As you can see, I ended up moving it forward a bolt hole and then just welding it on. And we had to cut off this section and rotate it to get a proper angle, otherwise the joint was binding up. So that is because the track bar was clobbering the upper part of the diff cover under suspension travel. And then these brackets, you can see it's butted up right against the side of the diff, and even with it butted up against the side of the diff, it is farther out than factory, which ended up helping me because before the springs would hit the frame rail and the shocks would hit the frame rail when flexing out. So now everything can cycle without rubbing, but it is I did mount both of them 5/16 inch farther apart than they were before on either side. So that is a little bit that I ran into. And then I used some Barnes 4-wheel drive lower control arm skids, and I have a wagoneer pitman arm to get the correct throw for the D44, which actually the factory taper for the wagoneer pitman arm is correct for a Chevy tie rod end, not a Chevy drag link end. But the Barnes 4-wheel drive crossover kit that I got comes with drag link ends, 4 of them instead of 2. Sorry, I think I said drag link ends. 2. It comes with 4 tie rod ends instead of 2 drag link ends and 2 tie rod ends, because it just uses 1 high angle tie rod end. So that way you can get it's more of a common part, so whenever you need spares or whatever, it's all easier to find. And then also the upper mount right there, I had to end up welding the press in Johnny joint bung into it because the Rubicon Express hole is a little bit larger than the factory hole, which is not a huge deal, but it is something I ended up having to do. And then the let's see if I can get you up in there. The drive shaft to link clearance is very tight, and they almost touch under compression. So that is something that I really had to pay attention to whenever I was cycling the suspension. And the brake lines matched right up, no problem. So overall, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. Took a little more time and a little more effort than I was expecting it to, but I think it'll be good in the long run. Hopefully soon I can afford some RCVs to strengthen that front even more. If you have any other questions about the setup or any particulars that I may have missed, just leave a comment below and I'll try and get back with you and cover whatever it is that I missed or messed up. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it.